I kind of wonder why everybody took off before I started talking today. I know Derek probably did because he's heard my story so many times. And that was the troublesome part about me thinking about doing my talk today. Because I've been one of the long-standing members of BNI, and not as long as RV, needless to say. But after doing a presentation 15 to 18 times or 20 times, it is very difficult to be fresh to those like Gene and Bruce who have heard me, Shari, forever and a long time. And it's kind of funny, I literally wanted to bring my notes up here because I've held, like this is my original notes to my first presentation way back in the day, and I never got rid of them, which is kind of strange about myself and the whole thing. But I wanted to try to be fresh and do something updated, so I apologize to those who have heard most of my story my whole life. I figured I'd kind of start my talk with the forks in the road. Again, I'll go back and to rehash the existence of my family and really to how the business started. So the first fork in the road, I guess, I could go back to my grandmother, is the fact that my entire family, including my dad, was from Philadelphia, back east. And I am such a West Coast kind of a guy, I would like to say. I can't imagine being in the cold or being back there, but bottom line is there was like 8 brothers and sisters from my grandmother's family, and she was always so bloody cold in Philadelphia that she just couldn't take it, and she bottom line told her husband at that time, we're going to California or we're divorcing. So she moved, and bottom line is she left her entire family, so I have cousins and relatives in the hundreds back in Philadelphia, which I've never necessarily talked about in the past, and thus my dad came out here at 4 years old. So I've been in California, and I always used to talk about I'm a Bubba boy because I love this area, I love the valley, I love Los Angeles, I love California, the weather, beautiful, and I'm a West Coast kind of guy. So that was kind of the first fork in the road, which is how I landed here and became a valleyite kind of person. The next fork in the road would be with me getting into this business. Because I talked about with my profile the fact that I had worked in a pizza place and I gone to school and did that. I worked at Gelson's supermarket for 5 years' time, and I talked about how I really wanted to work for myself. That is, I keep saying, the one area why or where I learned that I really wanted to be in business for myself. And so how did Lemark Insurance again form? Lemark Insurance formed because my dad basically was running a billiard lounge. And that was what his profession was. He used to hustle pool and have a billiard lounge and arcade when the arcades got kind of famous. And so he had a gentleman who came into that place and who used to shoot pool, and the guy was pretty successful, and he kind of talked and got friendly with the guy and asked him, what are you doing? And the guy says, I'm selling insurance. And the bottom line is my dad figured if this guy who my dad felt was smarter and brighter than, and this guy had a very successful living, he basically said, if this guy can do it, I can do it and probably be more successful. So the bottom line is my dad kind of broke away from the billiard lounge business, had my mom then go ahead and run that business, and she did that for another 15 or so years. And then he trained and got into auto insurance. And so what was the formula that this guy found? This guy found the formula to do areas where others didn't want to or couldn't. So he started in non-standard automobile insurance, which is basically handling high-profile drivers, those that have tickets and accidents, drunk drivings and issues where they can't find normal insurance. That was the origination of Lemark Insurance. So he started doing that and then turned out to be, through growth, the 4th largest Mercury casualty agent back in the 70s when the business was formed. So Lemark Insurance was formed in 1970, now 43 years ago. So as he's doing that, he ultimately told a rep to go F yourself. And that rep then kicked my dad out of the company, and then my dad was, holy cow, what am I going to do now? I'm screwed. I just lost the biggest marketplace, Mercury Casualty, who everybody still knows today as a marketplace, and didn't have it. So the bottom line is he learned commercial insurance. But he found the niche of how to get the business through this other guy, which was go find referral sources by captive agents. So I always am asking for the referrals of State Farm, or Allstate agents, or it could be life agents, those people who are in and around the insurance industry who have a very narrow market to what they can do. And they need guys like me, and part of what I realize is the fact that my business is built on other agents. My business is built on, I help those in the insurance field. I'm their source, because what these people can do with their offices and their businesses are so narrow and they're so limited. And in many cases, when you say they're captive, they're at an advantage because their names are out there with State Farm, Allstate, everybody knows them. Their disadvantage is they can only write with that carrier. So it's troublesome the fact that they don't have the luxury of marketing people or shopping or moving people around if need to be, or when they lose a client, that client's out their door, they can't keep it and push it around in another place, which that's what the power of a brokerage can be. That is the power of what we do. So I put out an example of well, if I skip back from there. Well, the power of me being able to move clients around is the fact, like I talked about this one client, Drumming for Your Life. So I had a client that happened to be a 501c3 nonprofit organization, so I talk about those as clients that are good referral sources. This 501c3, I didn't know, at first I didn't write the account, so one of my associates wrote the account in my office and had a normal general liability policy. Well, now this client wants to get non-owned auto, which is another parallel to a policy to protect himself because a contract is asking for it. And that's basically coverage to your business in the event you send an employee to drive for you in scope of employment, where employers don't realize their exposure to lawsuits, that when you send your employee out to drive, the employer can be sued because they're doing it for business. A lot of employers may not necessarily know that scenario. So the bottom line is the carrier that I had this client with, this nonprofit, didn't have non-owned auto. I know the carrier we placed him with won't write that coverage. They only want to write a tailored, manuscripted policy, which is the majority of what we can do, is have the luxury of niching clients or putting clients into specifically manuscripted, tailored policies to fit their specific needs. And so therefore, once I start talking with the client, which I had never talked to him in the past, I said, A, this carrier won't do it, but B is, the guy's paying $2,100 a year for his liability coverage. Okay, great. I'm like, hey, Stephen, I can move you to Nonprofits Insurance Alliance, a company who actually just formed exclusively to write 501c3, which is how I know about those nonprofits, because they only write those designated people who get that designation. And so they formed a company to only write that target market, and that's why they call themselves Nonprofits Insurance Alliance, and they are an insurance company. I moved him to this marketplace. I got him the non-owned auto. The policy premium is $1,400. Now, if you're sitting with a company, a big name carrier like Liberty Mutual, State Farm, the Allstate guys, they only have that market. What are you gonna, you can't move around and get the luxury of that guy shopping your price. Now, albeit I've talked about in the past, and Gene Stearns came the same kind of thing, I don't necessarily encourage people to move your insurance all the time or move it around when you build up history with that person that you've been with. It's important not to be skipping or whatever, hopscotch, jumping, something like that. Yeah, you don't want to be jumping around with your marketplace because, with the history you build up, that it helps you so that when you have problems, claims, issues, you can not get booted from that carrier. So that's the positive thing, is the fact that I don't really look for people to hopscotch around. It's going to hurt you in the long run. Now, albeit, if you're paying $2,100 and you get a policy for $1,400, you want to do that. And then the guy turns around and is going to get a contract with the school district, and the school district's now asking him for professional liability. Well, this carrier writes professional liability where the other one wouldn't, so I can do an add-on for professional liability. It's a humongous line of what our office writes, which there are so many fields, whether it's an attorney or technology people, where you get professional liability or called errors and omissions insurance. And every professional field, like doctors or lawyers or accountants and people like that, have this coverage. And those are great policies that I do because it's also not in the mainstream. These big normal carriers are not the ones that want to write that kind of policy. So that's what I am looking for as well when those people start talking about professional liability. He then turned around and said, by contract, he might need sexual conduct coverage, sexual abuse and molestation, because they're dealing with the kids at these school districts. Well, I guarantee you that these big carriers don't write sexual abuse and molestation coverage. In most cases, they hear the words, they don't even know how to. And there's so many scenarios where these other agents or people, and it's kind of funny because I kind of done so many of these talks. I talked about way back in the day, and so I couldn't remember the person's name, and I remember Samantha Doss now, who was a life person, and I remember doing a presentation over at Toluca Lake Tennis Club, Racket Club, when we were over there years back, and I inadvertently did something so horrible because I talked about the experience, and in my field it is everything. Everything, because I've talked about in different talks through all these different things of my trials and tribulations being in the insurance business, that I have screwed many a client by doing the wrong thing, because there's really so much to learn when you're dealing with 100 different carriers and everybody's policy form is different. But once you get somebody who's gone through it and failed, which I've talked about my failures, that's where you come out the other side, and now that you've been in the business 32 years now, you know what you're doing, hopefully. So that's what I have to lend to those, to your people that you refer, so that I always say is you never have to worry about an referral that's going to come my way, because I have seen every type of business imaginable that's come through my door. And so if someone were to call me with a unique line or something like that, I'm not going to say, I just don't know, or I do know. And I've been through it, I've seen it, and there's not much that's come through my way that just hasn't been processed or worked before. A new major thing I just talked about in my 60 seconds today, mobile applications. So I had two different types of comments I could talk about. One guy did a dating site. So he came out with this mobile application where you kind of put your information on there, and this is getting huge with all these mobile applications. Bruce has, asked for those, or does it for Vivian's, and et cetera, and other people who want to have these kind of exposures. If you have people who are doing these mobile applications, and another guy just called me, he wants to do a mobile application for a jigsaw puzzle. And the bottom line is when people are now putting their information on these sites, these business owners are exposing themselves to a liability that they're just not aware of, by taking credit card information or putting personal information of clients or people and their likes or dislikes and things like that, where if somebody taps into their site or gets their information, they're going to sue the business owner. And the business owner is just not going to have the proper coverage that's built into an office policy. They don't even have an office. They might be out of their house. But I write in-home business policies. One of my B&I bucks today is from Lauren Jacobson, who was our previous interior designer, and she has a little in-home business policy too. So there's a lot of people who do businesses out of their house, where if you call a mainstream carrier, they can't write you a business policy from a house location. They have to have an actual office. So they're not well versed in being able to do that. And the bottom line is I am able to do such unique types of lines that it's just very expansive, that it doesn't matter what you come across in order for me to do it. I just had a client call me the other day. Global One LA Training. It's a woman's clothing manufacturer, and she called me and telling me how she hired an employee recently, well, in the summertime, and the guy was only with her like a week and a half. And this guy was causing trouble, and she knew it was trouble from the second she brought him on. And she realized that there was going to be some issues, and all the employees were afraid, so the bottom line is she let the person go that short a time, week and a half, you're out the door. Well, now the guy turns around and files a workers' compensation claim. And obviously it's come to find out that this guy's been doing this a lot of times in the past. So this guy's working the system. But not only does he file a workers' compensation claim, he turns around with the lawyers, he goes ahead and files for discrimination. And the workers' compensation company, who's going through the labor board and covering him for whatever supposed injuries that he has, whether it's mental, because mental is part of the workers' compensation game too, that the work comp carrier sent a declination that they're not covering this guy for the discrimination portion of his claim through that lawsuit. So the client's screwed if they didn't have an employment practices liability policy. And this is probably one of the biggest lines that I've seen with business owners, where they don't really know or have that protection for all of the differing exposures that you have by you having a staff where if God forbid they leave, or God forbid you have an argument, or God forbid they feel like you pinched their butt, or God forbid you've made a sexual innuendo or something like that, that you are exposed to that suit. But it also doesn't necessarily stop there. It also was a scenario where you have an employee that you're not listening to, and they get friendly with somebody else on the phone, and then they have this relationship and they start up that way. And then if something goes awry, because people know how to work the system, that third party is going to turn around and sue the owner because the person that's your employee is having a good conversation or sexual conversation on the phone or something crazy with this third party. And now the suit doesn't come from inside your office as an employment practices from your staff, it's from a client. So you don't realize what exposures you have, and again, this is, thank God, my client finally had purchased an employment practices liability policy to protect her for this lawsuit, which is now going to defend her and save her tens of thousands of dollars. I've made a notation about the social services. I brought it up this morning, is the fact that I have clientele who have anorexic treatment centers. Another guy just starting a friend of mine is starting a alcoholic drug and alcohol sober living. Yeah, sober living, a rehab facility. So the social services that I talk about are for like rehab facilities, and these are very unique lines that our agency handles with expertise, etc. And other hot coverages that have kept my office going as of today, including Bruce's Homeowners Association. I feast off the State Farm what they do and they don't do. And State Farm in the past several years had done a purge, and I told Bruce way before it was even going to happen to his Homeowners Association. Years ago I said eventually you're going to get your homeowners association ripped out of their earthquake insurance. So, and that's for the commercial buildings. And sure enough, State Farm went through their purge over this 3 or 4 years, and their association finally got ripped out. I have feasted on those policies. It has been a great moneymaker for Lemark Insurance. So if you have clientele who have commercial buildings or even residential where there are other marketplaces other than the CEA, which for those of you who have homes who may have a California Earthquake Authority policy that your agent tells you this is all that's available, he's telling you that's all that's available because that's all he has available. So that's all some clients come to me and think the only market is the California Earthquake Authority. No, that's the only market your guy's feeding you because they can't go elsewhere. So there's a big alternative market for earthquake insurance to get that for residential housing. And then I also write commercial quake for buildings, associations, and things like that. So the latest thing, not that it's latest at all, but where I've done really well because the system has gotten so much quicker in terms of quoting is workers' compensation. It's a big, big policy offering that we have. We've done it for years. Every trade who has one person, you know, and I think I made a comment to Karen once upon a time, if you have a staff that works for you 1 hour a month, you're subject to having to have that coverage. You're exposed to those that can come after you, just like this other client that I have who had a guy for a week and a half, that you can be in big trouble and cost yourself tens of thousands of dollars because people are going to work the system and cook you. And I'm able to put these together and shop and compete and be very competitive with different marketplaces I have on the workers' compensation side. So those are some of the coverages I had that I wanted to talk about, etc., and clientele I have. You know, and that's basically what we do. But we all have had goals, and I do. And mine's also to continue on with the business and be here another 25 years. I'm going to be one of those guys, since I started the insurance business at 21 years old, that I'm going to be that 50-year veteran at 71 years old. And show you the experience and know that if you have entrusted me with the client that you're going to give me, that you're going to be well represented. And I thank you for your time.